just
Okay.
send it.
Okay,
It
thanks.
just popped up. It said, yeah, so go ahead. Thanks, guys.
Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to our Wednesday Wellness Chat. I'm Dr. Shobha Raipudi, co-founder of Gift of Health. And at Gift of Health, we empower people how to use food as medicine and how to change the lifestyle, because actually diet and lifestyle are the cause of many chronic conditions that we see nowadays. And today we are very excited to have a very special guest, Jennifer. And she is an author of a newly released cookbook. So Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it called the 5-ingredient cookbook?
Yeah, a 5-ingredient whole food plant-based cookbook. Yes.
Yes. So the 5-ingredient whole food plant-based cookbook. And without further ado, I'm just opening the floor to her. And like we were so excited, like actually like we were doing the show and just realized that it was not streaming in the Facebook. So we are really sorry about that. And Jennifer, she like all today she's demonstrating like how to make pizza and also make it from scratch. Especially when we buy store-bought pizza crust, they are either loaded with oil or they are loaded with other animal products. But today Jennifer is going to show us how we can do it in a whole food plant-based way. And just before we had this issue with the streaming, actually Jennifer was sharing our story. So Jennifer, like welcome to the show, and we would be glad to hear what actually brought you to this journey. Like, were you eating whole food plant-based all the way?
No, actually, no. I've been eating whole food plant-based for about 6.5 years. And like a lot of people, back in 2014, I watched the documentary Forks Over Knives. And I was really challenged by the information that was in there. I thought I was pretty healthy. I ate a lot of dairy and I thought that was really good for me. And so seeing that documentary with all the doctors talking about how inflammatory dairy can be and just all the other health concerns of animal products, I was really surprised. And I was a healthy weight. I didn't think I had any health problems that I really had to worry about. Especially didn't think anything that I was dealing with had anything to do with my diet. So but I was still really intrigued. So I thought I'd give it a try. So I set out to eat whole food plant-based. I thought I'd do it for a month. By the end of the month, I realized that I actually did have quite a few health problems that were associated to the way I was eating. I had asthma my whole life and was on asthma medication. I had chronic sinus infections. I had eczema. I had arthritis that was actually quite debilitating. I was only 33 years old and I had a lot of problems. I couldn't kneel down. My hands were quite stiff. I kind of always just attributed a lot of this to my age, which is funny because I was in my early 30s and that's not really something that I should have been dealing with at that point in my life. But as I cleaned up my diet and as I stopped eating animal products and minimized my oil, salt, and sugar and just started eating whole food plant-based, all those health issues just vanished and I got off all my medication. I was just blown away. And so I've stuck with it all these years. And shortly after that, I found out I was pregnant about 4 months later. That really spurred me on to do a lot of reading and research about the health benefits of eating this way, making sure that I was doing the right thing while I was pregnant. And it really just empowered me with tons of information from all these great doctors that are around, that I was, in fact, just doing a great thing for me and my baby. And and I started a small food blog, which has turned into a full-blown website and a Facebook group. And like you mentioned, I authored a cookbook this last year, 5-ingredient whole food plant-based cookbook. What I'm going to actually do, I'll show you one of the recipes out of it for a chocolate pudding while I wait for the pizza to cook later. And yeah, so it's just been a great journey.
Amazing journey, Jennifer. It's so amazing to hear, like just by changing your diet, like you were able to get rid of so many things. Like, so whether it was your health condition, and I'm especially happy to hear that, like, while you were pregnant, you were eating this whole food plant-based, which is the best gift for your babies too.
Yeah, and I had just such an enjoyable pregnancy. I have 2 kids now, and I was whole food plant-based for both. And I think it was just the best thing I could have done. I had so much energy, and I just felt so great. It was good. And the doctors were always so surprised. They were always very concerned about my iron and my B12, but my levels were always great. So that was always like a really fun situation for them to be concerned and to be able to show them that you can actually really have a healthy pregnancy while eating plant-based.
That's so great, because, and this is such a relief to hear for many mothers out there too, or even for pregnant women, because it's always a concern like, okay, if I'm having my pregnancy, is it okay to eat whole food plant-based way? And you are a stark example, like, yes, this can be done. And like with no deficiency, as you said, like your doctor was concerned, like whether you would be deficient in any of those vitamins or minerals, but like kudos to you. I mean, this is a testament, like where plants are the nutrient dense products that are available on this planet.
Yeah.
And so excited for you, and we are all excited to see like how to make pizza. I know you were already in the process, and I'm really sorry we had some issues with the stream.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. So would you mind just explaining the process of like how to set it up for the pizza crust?
Sure. Yeah, we'll show you kind of what we started there just a couple minutes ago. So in this bowl, you can see it's already really fluffed up. So what we have in here, we have a tablespoon and a half of yeast. I usually buy the pizza yeast. It's really no different than any quick rising yeast. I buy this one just because pizza's kind of the only thing I really make with it. There's 2 cups of warm water. 110 degrees is kind of like the perfect temperature, but as long as it's just really warm water that you can touch that isn't boiling but isn't cold, it'll be good. And then you ideally want a tablespoon of maybe date sugar, or maple syrup would work as well, something in there that's going to feed the yeast. If for some reason you're completely off of any type of sugar like that, you can admit it, the yeast will still work. It just doesn't have as much power, but it'll still work. So then we set that aside and we let it do its thing here. When you first put it in like this, it doesn't look all fluffy like this, but this is what we're looking for. So it's doing its thing. And now I'm going to show you the cheese that I make. I make one recipe, but I do 2 different things with it. So I'll kind of show you the 2 different ways you can use it. So what we've already put in here is a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, a tablespoon of lemon juice, and you can either buy, a bottle of lemon juice, or if you have fresh lemons, you can squeeze your own. And then in my pot back here, I have boiling. I have yellow potatoes, 1.5 cups of peeled, chopped yellow potatoes. I was saying that yellow potatoes tend to work the best. They're really creamy, but any potato will work. Red potato, russet potatoes, white potatoes, whatever you have will work. You just peel them up, chop them up into about 1 inch, 1.5 inch cubes, and 1.5 cups of those. And then in the boiling water as well, we have 1 cup of raw cashews. Raw cashews are very different than like roasted cashews. You don't want cashews that have been roasted or that have salt on them. These are just plain raw cashews. This is a brand that I buy at Superstore. If you happen to be in Canada, these are the cheapest ones around, and just keep them in my fridge, and I can use them for lots of different recipes. So we let those potatoes and the cashews boil for about 20 minutes. They've been on there for maybe like 7 or 8 right now. And I was saying too about my blender. I have this fancy Blendtec blender. A lot of people have Vitamix blenders. You don't really need a fancy blender to make this cheese recipe. The boiling is going to soften up the cashews quite a bit. So even if you have just kind of a basic kitchen blender, you should be able to blend them pretty smooth. If you're concerned, you can soak the cashews overnight. So you can put them in a jar with some water, cover them really well with water, leave them in your fridge overnight before you're going to make this recipe. So yeah, so that's what we have in there. We also have, there's also garlic in here. I can't remember if I said that. Oh yeah, there's a teaspoon of garlic. And then we were just getting to the nutritional yeast. So nutritional yeast, we add into this cheese recipe as well. If you're new to plant-based eating, you may have never heard of this. You're gonna find it in kind of a natural section in a grocery store or in a bulk food store. You can also get it on Amazon. I actually tend to order it there just because I sometimes can't find it easily, and I just order it on Amazon and it gets delivered right to my house. So we want 3 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. And this just gives like a cheesy flavor. Some people don't like nutritional yeast, and there's 2 types of nutritional yeast around. Most of the nutritional yeast is fortified, so it has B12 and other vitamins added to it. If you find you don't like the flavor of it, try to find one that's not fortified. They're a little trickier to find, but Amazon carries them. And the ones that aren't fortified have what I would describe as a cleaner, cheesier taste. And I actually prefer them. They're just harder to find, so I often will just buy the fortified ones. But some people really don't like the taste of the fortified ones. They're like really sensitive to the fact that they're fortified. I don't really notice a difference myself, but if you're somebody who doesn't like nutritional yeast, that's kind of something to check out. The other thing that we're going to put in the cheese recipe is agar-agar, which this is optional. What it does is it helps the cheese firm up. So if you don't have this or you can't find this, it's actually an optional ingredient, but it's just going to make the cheese a little more firm, kind of more like a cheese that you would be used to if you're used to dairy cheese. I put 2 teaspoons of agar-agar in here. And if you're wondering what this is, it's made out of seaweed. There's no other ingredients in it. It's not like a chemical anything or synthetic anything. It's just made out of seaweed. And so it's a derivative from seaweed, and it just helps everything gel up. You could also use tapioca starch instead of that as well, which will work. It just kind of helps everything stick together. So this is our spices and everything for our cheese sauce. I'm just gonna let the potatoes and cashews boil a little bit longer, and then we're gonna mix it all up. So I'm just gonna stick that back there. While we wait for that whole thing to go, I'm gonna show you how I make a really simple pizza sauce. If you go looking for pizza sauce in the grocery store, you're probably gonna find that it's loaded with salt, sugar, and oil. And even sometimes it has dairy hidden in there. It'll have like Parmesan cheese to make it extra flavorful. So I have a recipe on my website for batch cooking pizza sauce, which is what I do a lot because we eat so much pizza. So I'll make a huge pot of it and then I jar it and I keep it in my fridge. But I'm going to show you a really simple way to make pizza sauce right now. It's not hard, it's not difficult. You can find all the ingredients in your grocery store where you live. This is Italian seasoning. I make up my own mix of it, but any Italian seasoning that you find in the store would work. This is tomato paste. These 2 that I have here, one's the Unico brand, one is the No Name brand. I know that Costco carries a brand as well, and an organic one that I'll often buy as well. And they're all, if you look at the ingredients on these, it's just tomatoes. There's no salt added, there's no oil added. You want to watch out for that. Some of the tomato pastes are flavored, and so you get like garlic ones or Italian ones, and those ones tend to have quite a bit of sugar, salt, and oil added into them. So just, you don't need that. You can just get just a really basic tomato paste, and then we're going to mix in, where's the can? I have a can that's already open, so we're going to use that, but it'll be 1 can, so it's 1 small can like this. And where's my bowl at? It's here. So into that, we are going to mix 1 tablespoon of Italian, half a teaspoon of garlic powder again. Again, if you wanted to use fresh garlic, you could use a clove of fresh garlic and just press it or dice it up. Yeah, half a teaspoon of garlic. If you like things more garlicky, you could add more. I'm a garlic person, so if I was making this just for me, I'd probably have way more in there, but this is kind of a basic recipe. And then a tablespoon of water, just to water it down, because the tomato paste is actually pretty thick. We'll get a tablespoon of water. There we go. And then our tomato paste. And that's it. And that's a really simple sauce that you can use. If you like tomato sauce that's a little sweeter, I know some people do, you can add some molasses in here, like a tablespoon of molasses would sweeten it up, or a tablespoon of maple syrup if you want to be extra Canadian pizza, you could do that. I don't really find I really need the sweetness. I've been eating this way for so many years that I don't miss those flavors. I know when people are first transitioning, sometimes it's easier to make it a little sweeter, so that, especially if it's for kids that maybe have been used to eating sweeter foods for years, you can add a little bit of maple syrup or some date paste if you have date paste. And that's it. It's just a really simple sauce.
Oh, wow.
You don't have to cook for anything.
Yeah,
and that's
This
Yeah,
is really wonderful, Jennifer. Yeah, just adding the tomato paste. So I know, like, when you add it from the can, so like, would you be able to tell in terms of like ounces or grams, like how much?
Yeah, sure. So I usually use these small counts. So this is 156 milliliters or 5.5 liquid ounces.
Okay.
It's about a quarter of a cup if
Okay.
you're measuring it that way. And you could make up more, make up less. If you're making more pizzas, obviously you're going to want to make more. This is about how much I use for one pizza, which is how much dough we're going to end up with. So
Yeah, this is cool. I mean, this is fast and easy and yum.
yeah, it's not too bad at all. Okay, so our potatoes are still boiling. I'd say they still need a couple more minutes. So I'm gonna move on and show you how to do the crust. So we have our yeast going. So next thing we're gonna do is mix up our crust. So I have 2 different flours here that I'm gonna use today. One's a whole wheat flour. And the recipe that I use calls for 3 cups of flour. So I'm actually gonna use 2 cups of this whole wheat flour. And actually, when I was out shopping the other day, I found this oat flour. So you could use any combination of flours. If you're new to whole grain breads, whole grain pizza crusts, you can also do half and half white flour and whole grain flour to kind of get used to it, and then work your way up to a 100% whole grain flour pizza crust. It's kind of up to you. If you're looking for a gluten-free kind of crust, you can also find some gluten-free flours. I'm going to use a cup of this oat flour. It's very similar to the whole grain flour, but it's just going to give it a little bit of different nutrients in there, which is always nice, and it'll still fluff up the same way. Except this bag is small, which I don't really like.
So Jennifer, while you're pouring that, so let's say if we have to make gluten-free crust, so can we just use the gluten-free oat flour or?
Yeah. So this, I'm fairly certain this one here would be considered gluten-free. It might not be certified because I don't know if it's made in a gluten-free facility. It doesn't really say, but I know there are gluten-free oat flours. So yes, you would be able to make it with an oat flour. So we have 1 more cup of oat flour, and I'm just mixing the 2 just because, just for something different. The other thing that I put in here is tahini, which is a sesame paste. This is also an optional ingredient. I put this in here because I find when I'm kneading it, it helps it stay moist. It helps it not stick. Sesame paste is just pure sesames ground up. Again, if you're not familiar with this, it's usually kind of in the health section of the grocery store. Maybe sometimes, like if there's an ethnic aisle, it's there. And I use about 2 tablespoons of this. Mix it right in. This I keep in the fridge too. I actually don't know if it needs to be in the fridge, but I've always kept it in the fridge. It seems to stay fresh way longer. And I actually spice up my my crust. So to the crust, I also put 2 tablespoons of basil. Actually, I'm going to use this just to give it a little bit of extra flavor. And I put some nutritional yeast in here too, just to make it a little bit, gives it a little bit of a cheesy, nutty flavor. And I put 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast as well. This is a half tablespoon I'm using, so I'm putting 4, but it's actually 2 tablespoons. And then optionally would be salt. If you wanted to add a teaspoon of salt, you could add it. It's not necessary at all, so that's just an optional thing. To this, we are adding our yeast mixture that we made earlier. Before you put it in, you want to make sure that it did fluff up like this, that the yeast actually grew. So it looks really great. So we're going to mix it in. I'm going to grab a spoon. We're going to mix it up. Now, one of the things that we need to do for this is it needs to be kneaded. I have a KitchenAid mixer that has a bread dough hook. So that's what I usually do. I throw it into my KitchenAid mixer, put the bread dough hook on, which I'll show you what it looks like because I don't think you guys can see it. So bread dough hook looks like this. And so you'll put that into your mixer if you have a stand mixer, and put that bread dough hook on, and you're gonna mix it up for 10 minutes. I love my mixer because it does all the work for me. But otherwise, what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna incorporate all this flour into the dough. Make sure it's all in there really good. And then you'd be kneading it by hand. You don't need to knead it for 10 minutes, but you wanna make sure that it's all really well incorporated. You don't want the dough to be too sticky, but you also don't want it to be too dry. I know that's kind of vague, but you don't want it sticking to your hands. You don't want it sticking to the counters, but you also don't want it so dry that it seems like it's going to be really dry when you cook it. So you want kind of like something in the middle so that it's like a dough. So this right now, and you can add flour if you find that it's too sticky. This one seems like we might need to add a little bit of flour. And depending on the flour that you use too, it might just be that you need a little more water or a little less water. There's lots of things that kind of affect dough. So yeah, this one we're gonna need some more water, or sorry, some more dough, more flour. So I'm gonna put about a cup of more flour in here. Just so that it's not sticking to my hands. There we go. And now I can see that it's not going to stick to my hands when I put it around. And you can make a ball with it. So you'll end up with a dough like this. You can see it. And you'll want to knead it into itself until it's all really well incorporated. When I put it in the stand mixer, I usually do it for about 10 minutes. It's just to make sure it's all really nice and solid. So then when you're done with it like this, you're actually gonna put it into a bowl. I'm just gonna lay it back into this bowl. And you're gonna wanna let it sit so that it rises for a while. So I usually make this dough kind of earlier in the day, maybe in the afternoon, not quite right at supper time. I throw a towel over it and I let it sit. I actually have one back here sitting that you can see that I made right before we started, so that we can see what it looks like after it rises. So you want to let it rise anywhere from a half an hour to an hour, just so that it almost doubles in size. And I'll show you what it looks like. Our potatoes look like they're doing good there. I'd say they're done. But I'll show you the dough. Yeah, so this was the same size as that before. I'll show you the before and after. So this is before. It takes up about half of this bowl. And this is the after. It's risen right up to the top.
Yeah, it rose so well.
Yes, yeah. I don't know. I feel like that pizza yeast does do something a little different than regular yeast because it always seems to work out. So we're gonna take it out of here. I'm just gonna let it fall out. This bowl is still really warm from earlier. When you're letting it rise, if you can put it somewhere kind of warm, like if you have the oven kind of preheated, sit it by the oven, put a towel over it. It just keeps the heat in and helps the yeast to keep rising it. So I'm gonna take it out. And you can use a rolling pin if you want, but I actually just tend to roll it out. You might need a little bit of flour to roll it out. Just sprinkle a little bit of flour on your counter here, or on your, wherever you're gonna roll it out. So you can do two different things. Oh, sorry, what was that?
So can we get this Pisa yeast in our just regular grocery stores?
Yeah, it's usually just right next to the quick rise yeast, and the quick rise yeast works too. I just use that pizza yeast. There's nothing different about it. I think it's maybe just it might even just be a marketing thing. It has a pizza recipe on it, so maybe that's all it is. So with this recipe for this dough, you can either make 2 flat crust pizzas, like 9-inch pizzas, or you can make 1 12-inch kind of thicker crust pizza. So that's what I'm gonna do today. I'm just gonna do a thicker crust pizza. But if you wanted to break these in half and use a rolling pin and roll them out really thin, you could do that as well if you prefer a thin crust pizza. I kind of like a thicker crust pizza. So I didn't really need a rolling pan as you can see, like it's just a pizza crust. It's pretty easy to work with. And I have a pan already ready to go, the pizza pan here. And I put parchment on it because there's no real fat or oil in this. And so the parchment's just gonna help you later when you're taking it off. Make sure that it doesn't stick to your pan at all. I push it out, and I usually try to use my knuckle and make a bit of a crust. Make a little bit of an indent there so it looks like a pizza. And then we can put it aside. We have our pizza sauce ready to go. I'm gonna leave that for a second, and I'm gonna show you how I do the cheese. So you can see how that's gonna turn out. Got a bit of a mess here with the flour, but that's okay. You know what we'll do? We'll just put that right there. Okay, so our potatoes and cashews should be pretty soft by now. So we don't want to drain this completely because we're actually going to use a cup of this water for making the cheese, or actually a half a cup, I think. Let me double check here. Yeah, half a cup of this water. So with a measuring cup, I want to take a half a cup of this hot water out. So it's easier if you have a measuring cup with a handle, of course. So just dip it in. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you're looking for about a half a cup of liquid. That's about a half a cup. So you put that in here. The reason we want to use the water from the boiled potatoes and not just straight fresh water, the starch from the potatoes comes out into the water, and it actually makes this more cheesy to use this kind of starchy water. So you'll find like any of the plant-based, potato-based cheese recipes tend to use the water, and it actually makes a big difference. If you use fresh water, you'll notice it's not quite as good. So we want to drain the potatoes and the cashews. I have a colander here. I'm not just pouring them into the sink. And then you'll want to put all these potatoes and cashews into your blender. There we go. Lid on, don't forget your lid. And then we blend this up. Just gonna blend it, it's gonna get crazy noisy. So that was about a 30-second blend. If you have a less powerful blender, you might need to blend it for up to 2 minutes. You just want to watch it and make sure that it gets really, really creamy and thick. And I'll show you what it looks like when it comes out. So this is like a liquid matzah. So, and especially when it's hot, it really feels and smells and tastes like hot matzah cheese on a pizza.
Wow.
So there's 2 ways you can build your pizza with this type of cheese. If you're just making your pizza today and you want to just make it everything today, you can take this cheese and you can put it in a squirt bottle if you want to be fancy and put it on top as cheese, and it's going to melt into the pizza and just look like mozzarella. It's going to be amazing. The other thing that I like to do, it's a little more of a process, but I take this cheese when it's hot like this and I put it in a glass container. I let it cool off and I actually freeze it. The next day, I take it out of my freezer. Then I can put it into a shredder. Then I end up, when it comes out of the shredder, I end up with these cheese shreds that are more like matzah shreds that maybe people are used to putting on pizza.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, and I actually just keep these in the freezer. So I always have bags of this shredded potato matzah, is what I call it, that I can use to make pizza really quickly. So even if my kids just want some quick pizza for lunch, we can quickly make it. The liquid cheese sauce will last in the fridge for like a week as well. So as long as you store it in an airtight container, that also will store really well. But I just like having this in the freezer because it makes it so much quicker. And I can make quesadillas with this. I can make a breakfast scramble. I can do so many other things with this frozen one. You don't want to take it out of the fridge and leave it in the fridge because it'll just kind of get gooey and it's not as easy to use. So when I make the pizza, I'm gonna do half with the liquid cheese and half with the matzah, so you can kind of see the difference. Mm-hmm. Or with the frozen matzah, I should say. Okay, so we have our pizza crust. We are going to put our pizza sauce on it. Spread it all out. Everybody kind of has their own feelings about how much sauce should be on the pizza. I like lots myself. Do you guys make pizza a lot?
So our son, like we have a 16-year-old son, and he loves pizza. Like he wants it every week.
Yeah.
So we do make quick flat bake pita pizzas, which are very quick.
Yes.
So we just put the pizza sauce on the pita bread and put our choice of veggies, and it's ready in 5 to 10 minutes.
Yes.
And but like we haven't made like pizza like from scratch.
Right. Yeah. It's a little more work for sure. The other thing too is you can actually make these crusts in advance. So I do that as well. And so instead of putting the sauce on it now, I would throw it in the oven for about 5 minutes, and then I freeze it. I let it cool off, and then I'll wrap it and freeze it so that another day, you know, if I want to make pizza, I already have them ready to go. Or you can make small ones as well. Like you're saying, like with the pitas, it's nice to make like personal pizzas. So you can do that as well.
No, this is actually a great idea, Jennifer. So, I mean, like we can just put it in the oven for 5 to 10 minutes and then freeze the crust.
Yeah, I can show you what I did last night. Just 1 second. So this one I popped in the oven last night. So it's all cooked. So it's cooled off now. So I can just take it and I can wrap it up and put it in the oven, or sorry, put it in the freezer. And then all I have to do is defrost it. And when I'm ready to eat it, I can heat up my oven, cover it with my toppings. It obviously doesn't take as long to cook because it's already been cooked, but it's kind of like a pre-made store-bought pizza crust, which is really nice to have.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's a wonderful idea.
Then, of course, you want to do your toppings. Today I have red peppers. Sometimes I like to pre-cook the toppings. So I'll like water saute my mushrooms and my onions and everything to put them on here. But today I'm just putting everything on just straight from chopping it. I find too, if you chop your toppings up really, really thin, they tend to cook better on the pizza. And I have mushrooms. Love mushrooms. I would eat just mushroom pizza sometimes. When I'm cooking for my kids, I usually let them kind of make their own pizzas, which is lots of fun. And they also tend to eat more when they do that. My kids are really young still. My daughter's 2 and my son is 5. And I find the more I let them help, the more interested they are in eating food, which is nice.
Yes.
I'm sure everybody kind of has experienced that. So then some yellow peppers. And then I also have fresh basil, which I love putting fresh herbs on pizza. I just find it makes it so much fancier, and it just makes it feel like you're making like a special meal. It also smells so great. In the summer when we grow basil, it's really cool to have that basil, the fresh basil.
Nice.
Another thing I like putting on pizza too, which may be weird to people or new to people, is arugula. Arugula really, I don't know, it just really crisps up really nice. I mean, you wouldn't think like a lettuce type of thing on pizza would be good, but it is almost like a herb. And spinach on pizza is good too. Spinach is another great way to get a little bit of greens in when you're having pizza. But even just the basil, having lots of fresh basil on there is really, really nice. I also tend to keep, I always have this. This is just a jar that I have made of what I call pizza spice. So in here is Italian seasoning, garlic, and nutritional yeast. And I just have it ready to go because we make so much pizza that I just like to have this so I can top my pizza with it. I just find it just adds a little bit of extra flavor to it. And yeah, we put that on there. So I'll show you the 2 different cheeses. I don't know, can you guys see this quite well? I'll push it up here a little bit.
Yes, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see that there. So yeah, so with the frozen cheese matzah, you can sprinkle it on. It's just like what you would be used to as a dairy matzah, or maybe if you're coming from a vegan kind of diet and trying to switch to healthier foods, this is kind of more similar to the consistency of like a vegan cheese, but obviously way healthier. And so that's that. And then the liquid cheese. It's not going to be as pretty, but it melts up just as nice. And if you're going to use this, if you made it and you're storing it in the fridge, you'll want to heat it up a little bit before you put it on your pizza. It just goes on a little bit better. When it's cold, it's really hard to work with. When it's nice and warm, you can spread it around and it's more like a cheesy kind of consistency. And then you can do as much as you want. I find I don't put as much on here as I would like when I used to eat, you know, like traditional kind of takeout meat cheese pizza is just loaded with cheese, but I don't put as much on there. I like to really enjoy the other toppings more so than, you know, having it just completely smothered in cheese.
It's already looking yummy, Jennifer.
Yeah, right? It already looks so good.
Yes.
So we're gonna pop it in the oven about 8 to 10 minutes. And actually, when I cook my pizza, I cook it really high. So I set my oven to 550 degrees.
Wow.
You can cook this at 425, but I find the hotter the oven, the better the crust is. And so if your oven can go up that high, you should turn it up that high. If you have a pizza stone, it cooks really well on a pizza stone. But yeah, I just find the higher the temperature in the oven, the better it tastes. So we're gonna pop this right in. I already had my oven preheated. So yeah, so it's gonna be about 8 to 10 minutes. So I think in that 8 to 10 minutes, I can show you how to make a chocolate pudding out of my cookbook. So let me just grab this stuff here. I need to get this blender clean. Just 1 second. I'm just gonna take my cheese out of here because we're gonna use the blender again. So this cheese recipe makes enough cheese to probably make 3 large pizzas. So if you wanted to make less, you could cut it in half if you really just want to try it, or you don't really think you're going to use it up. But again, you can store it in the freezer. And even in a liquid state like this, you can store it in the freezer, take it out, put it in the fridge for a day, let it defrost. It'll look a little different. The consistency of the cheese changes when you freeze it like this. But if you throw it back in a blender after you defrost it, it just takes a minute in a blender and it goes right back to being like this. Just gonna clean out my blender so we can make our pudding. I'm gonna grab our pudding stuff.
Yeah, like our son loves cheese, so cheese sauce is a kind of a staple in our house. Like every week we make them and we put it in the freezer too. So whenever he wants to have his mac and cheese or cheese on the pizza, it's there.
Yes, it's always good to have this stuff just prepped in the fridge. And if you're making, a sauce like that, you can just double it and then you have stuff for before. And honestly, that's one of the things that's really helped me stick with eating this way is batch cooking. I have 2 young kids and I work full time. So having ways to have the fridge full of food that's healthy is really key for me. And I think everybody's busy these days. Everybody's looking for convenience foods. So if you can make your own convenience foods, that's just like the way to make this work. It's the way to stick with it. So I think it's human nature to always grab whatever's the easiest, right? So if you already have some healthy food prepped in the fridge, you're gonna pick that over, run into the store to grab something. I'm just gonna clean out this blender.
Sure.
So also the nice thing about these blenders is they have a clean cycle. You just throw them in with a little bit of soap and they almost clean themselves. It's really nice. Just get a little bit of this cheese off in there. Okay, that's mostly clean. It's good enough. Okay, so the chocolate pudding that I'm gonna make, it's out of my cookbook that we were talking about. It's on page 95, and I will actually share the recipe so that you guys can see it online too. It's super simple. I'm gonna tell you what's in it. So it's 3 avocados, a half a cup of unsweetened plant-based milk. So whatever kind you happen to have. I tend to use almond or oat just because it has the least amount of flavor. If you use something like coconut milk, it's really, the flavor tends to be overpowered by the coconut flavor. So almond milk oat milk, anything like that is good. Soy milk, of course, is a good option. 1.5 tablespoons of vanilla extract, 1/4 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder, so that's just plain cocoa powder. And then optional is 3 tablespoons of maple syrup. So again, this is gonna sweeten it up. I like it without the maple syrup. A lot of people, when they hear pudding, they're expecting it to be super sweet. So if you add a little bit of maple syrup, you're gonna have a sweet pudding. So what we're gonna do, let me grab everything here. And a knife. And if you're not an avocado fan, that's okay. You're not really gonna taste the avocado in this. I actually really didn't like avocado when I first went plant-based. Thought it was kind of weird. It took me a while to really start trying it. And I think that a recipe similar to this is kind of like what I first used. If you cut the avocado in half, you can use a spoon to just pull it right out of there. And you want the avocados to be pretty ripe. Getting ripe avocados is a bit of an art. If you go to the store and buy them, you can pick them out yourself, but they get ripe really quick. So if you have some that are ripe, just stick them in the fridge and they'll stay a little firmer for you until you're ready to use them. But yeah, you want them to be pretty ripe so that they're nice and smooth. You don't want hard avocados trying to blend those up. So these avocados actually are perfect for this. They're really, really soft, but they haven't turned brown yet. They're just really nice.
Mm-hmm.
These ones are on the smaller side, but it doesn't really matter what size you use.
It's interesting you mentioned that like when you first tasted avocados, you didn't like it. Even I was not so much fond of avocados when I first tasted them. But
Yeah.
like it was surprising like how it just grew on me.
I think that's with a lot of things, right? Like, I mean, I ate fairly healthy before. Like, I grew up eating beans and lots of vegetables and salad. But when I first went whole food plant-based, it was like, oh, like a lot of these things I hadn't tried before. You know, avocado being one of those things. Not that you have to eat avocado. It's kind of, you know, it's a treat food, really. That's why I'm using it to make a dessert. But yeah, there's just all these new foods, and you start to realize that before your diet was really limited, and suddenly you're kind of like opened up to all these new foods, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got our 3 avocados. And then we want, what is this at? 1.5 tablespoons of vanilla. Here's my tablespoon. So and cocoa powder, 1/4 cup. Let me grab that. That's a 1/4 cup of cocoa powder. And it's 1/2 cup of plant milk. This is almond milk. This is a whole cup, so I'm just going to use half of this. Yeah, that's about half. And then the maple syrup. Oh, there we go. Which, if you're not in Canada, I will just add that it's real maple syrup. You don't want like table syrup or maple flavored something. You want pure 100% maple syrup. It's just a little more natural than all that other stuff that's just pure sugar, table sugar. So I do about 3 of these. You could do less. This is kind of how I make it for my kids who like it to be a little extra sweet. Then we blend it up. So it'll be noisy again. So that was about 30 seconds in my blend tag. If you have a a less high-speed blender, maybe a minute. You just want to make sure that it gets really creamy. And then it's just like a pudding. And actually, a couple years ago, I think it was my 36th birthday, I was home visiting my family in Halifax. That's where I'm originally from. And I made these for everybody for my birthday because I was making my own birthday treat. And everybody loved it. Like even people that were used to eating, like pudding pops and like really high sweet, high fatty things. And so it just looks like a pudding and it tastes just like pudding. Yeah, it's really good. And one of the other thing I do with this too is sometimes I'll put it in my kids' popsicle molds and I'll freeze it and it's kind of like a fudgesicle.
Wow.
So, that too. So yeah, so let's see if our pizza's done because it should be done. Let me check it out there. That looks done. So here's our pizza.
Wow.
It's beautiful. The cheese is nice and brown. I think you can see it there.
Yes.
And yeah, it's great. The pizza fluffs up a lot. So again, if you like the thinner crust pizza, you could make this 2 9-inch pizzas. You could roll it out with a rolling pin, but I kind of like it like this. It reminds me more like of a restaurant pizza.
And yes, it exactly looks like a restaurant pizza actually.
Yeah.
Like even when you serve to the guest, it would be hard for them to tell that it's homemade.
Yeah, I think so, right? I think it's great and people like it. My family likes it. We make these pizzas quite often. So that's my pizza and my kids love it and my pudding. So
Bob, you got the best. You got the pizza and the pudding. What else can we ask for?
I'm so excited to eat now. It's supper time here, so I have it all ready to go.
So Jennifer, we have one question here. So when you were mentioning like when you're trying to freeze the crust, what do you wrap the pizza crust with before freezing? Like,
I usually wrap it in like a plastic wrap. Okay. If you had a big enough container, you could obviously put it in containers. If you made like small personal size ones, you could put it in some containers pretty easy and just wrap them like that. If you're going to stack them on top of each other, definitely let them cool and put some parchment paper between them just so they don't freeze together.
Okay. So we could just use a plastic or the food wrap. Yeah,
exactly, like a saran wrap.
Okay, that's excellent. Oh my God, like our viewers are loving and they're like, oh my, it's so yummy. And
it's really, really good. And everybody I make it for is always like amazed. They're like, I can't believe there's no oil, sugar, salt added to this. It's pretty good.
Oh my God.
And you can see the difference in the cheeses too. So like I don't know if you can see. So this is the one that was the frozen cheese that's shredded, and then this is kind of the liquidy one. Both of them look cool. I feel like the shredded one looks a little more like a real restaurant pizza.
Yeah. The shredded.
Taste the same.
Yes, yeah. The shredded one just looks like a restaurant pizza. So
yeah.
It's really yummy. Oh my God.
Wish you were here so I could give you some to try.
Yes, I know. Thank you so much for showing, because this is so helpful, Jennifer. I mean, like you have just showed us the easy way how to make a homemade pizza, and that too, like just a restaurant look kind of thing of a pizza, I would say. I'm really looking forward to try this pizza for this weekend.
Oh, good. I hope you make it. You'll have to send me some pictures if you do it.
Sure. And I really love the pizza crust that you have. Like it's nice, thick, and I love the thick crust, just like you have made, because it just gives that nice feel.
Yes, yeah, it totally does.
Yes, and for our viewers who are wondering, so like we have just posted the link for Jennifer's cookbook, and you can also order it from. So we have shared the link here.
Thanks.
Yes, it's yummy, and we have also posted the recipes here in the chat. So it's in there. Yeah, so people are all excited. They're like, oh, this is my few favorite recipe. Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like pizza is such like every family, it's such a just thing that everybody likes. That usually, if you want to feed everybody and make everybody happy, getting pizza is usually the option that everybody likes. So it's nice to have a healthier option for that.
Yes. And I know some of you are asking where can we get the cookbook. So the link we have just posted in the chat. So it's the 5-ingredient whole food plant-based cookbook, easy recipes. Yes. Yeah. Oh, I love the pink color on the book.
Oh, I know. Isn't it bright and colorful? Yeah, it's really fun.
Yes. And yeah, the link is posted here. And when you go to the link, you could order the book from there. And yes. And thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you for your time. And we are
You're so
really
welcome.
excited that like we got to see this yummy recipe. And especially like I love like how fast and quick like you made that pizza sauce.
Yeah, the pizza sauce is easy, and I find it tastes just like a store-bought pizza sauce. Like it's the spices that really make it. And actually, like I think a lot of people when they start cooking whole food plant-based, that's really the key is learning to use more spices than maybe what you're used to before. Instead of the
Yes.
salt and the sugars, use some other spices that you like. So if you're not a big garlic fan, you can omit the garlic and maybe put something else in there that you like and make it a little
Yes.
different. So,
Yes. As you said, the spices are the key.
yes.
So thank you so much, Jennifer. And
You're welcome.
yes, and we'll also have you later to. I know there are so many wonderful recipes on your cookbook, and
Oh, thanks.
and we are also like eager to get you on later as well, like with more recipes. So thank you so
Yeah, for
much.
sure. Anytime.